The chickens were screaming again. Jonas Redden stepped out into the cold dawn, boots crunching over frostbitten dirt, shotgun resting against his shoulder. The sun was barely rising over the broken hills, casting long shadows across his lonely ranch. For 3 mornings straight, the hens had been in a panic, scratching at the far corner of their coop like something inside was trying to claw back out. A fox, he thought, or a snake. But as he rounded the warped boards of the old hen house, something behind the wire made him stop dead in his tracks. A hand, small, pale, pressed against the mesh from the inside. Something human was trapped in his chicken coop, and the fear in those dark eyes asked him a question he wasn't sure he was ready to answer. Would he save her or walk away like everyone else had? Jonas dropped to one knee, shotgun forgotten in the dirt. His breath caught somewhere between his chest and throat. Behind the flapping, frantic birds squeezed into a space meant for hens and nothing human was a girl, maybe 19, maybe 20, weak, filthy, and shaking. Her black hair hung in matted ropes. Her dress was torn to shreds, smeared with dirt, feathers, and dried blood. Rope burns ringed her wrists. Her lips were cracked. Her eyes, wide, dark, terrified, fixed on him like he was her last hope, or her next threat. Jonas leaned closer, palms open, voice low. Easy now. The girl pressed herself tighter into the corner, shoulders trembling. Her breath wheezed out in short, shallow gasps. She whispered something, soft, broken, in a language he didn't know. It sounded like a prayer, or a plea. Jonas's heart tightened. 8 years alone on this ranch, and he hadn't felt anything crack through the wall around him. Not since the fever took his wife, Rebecca, and their daughter, Annie. He'd buried them under the cottonwoods and sworn never to let the world hurt him like that again. But this girl, no one had to tell him what had been done to her. He saw it all in her bruises, her silence, her terror, and a makeshift lock on the outside of the coop. Someone had put her there. Someone planned to come back. He fumbled with the latch. His hand shook worse than during the old border skirmish he'd fought in as a young man. When the wire door creaked open, the girl recoiled, covering her head with both arms like she expected a blow. Jonas froze, swallowing hard. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said softly. "Not now. Not ever." She didn't understand the words, but tone counted for more. Her arms loosened by an inch. He reached out slowly. The morning light caught the purple bruises across her forearms. Some new, some old, some too painful to think about. When she tried to speak, her voice came out like scraped metal. Hoarse, broken. She touched her throat, shaking her head. They'd heard her voice too. Jonas steadied himself against the doorway, breath fogging in the cold air. The girl was barely alive. Whoever left her here had meant for her to die. He glanced toward the empty road. No riders yet. No wagons. That gave them maybe an hour. Maybe less. The only smart choice was to ride into town and find a sheriff. Except the sheriff in Willow Bend was Luther Crane, a man who solved problems by burying them, especially problems involving foreigners, as he called them. Jonas rubbed his jaw, staring at the girl trembling among the hens. He hadn't looked another human being in the eyes for more than a minute in 8 long years. Not since Annie's small hand slipped away from his. But this girl, something in her gaze pulled at him. A silent cry for someone, anyone, to do the right thing. Jonas slid an arm around her shoulders. She fought him at first, weak but desperate, breath ragged. He held steady, murmuring, "Easy, easy." Her fight broke quickly. Her body had nothing left. She weighed almost nothing, like lifting a bird with hollow bones. He carried her out of the coop, her head slumping against his shoulder. In the morning light, the full truth hit him hard. Bruises, rope burns, a torn dress that wasn't torn by accident. He closed his eyes for half a second. Then he heard it. Hoofbeats, distant but coming fast. The girl heard them too. Her entire body tensed in his arms. Panic spread across her face so violently it stole his breath. Jonas looked up the ridge. Dust kicked up along the horizon. 4 riders, moving with purpose, not wandering. They were coming for her. Jonas's pulse kicked hard in his throat. He lifted her more securely and whispered, "Trust me." Her fingers clung to his coat. That was all the permission he needed. He carried her behind the cabin, toward the old storm cellar his grandfather had dug back when the valley saw trouble every other season. The trapdoor was covered with feed sacks and rusted tools, hidden well enough most men would miss it. Jonas pulled the sacks aside and lifted the door. "Down," he whispered. The girl hesitated at the dark opening. Shadows swallowed the narrow ladder. He nodded, voice low. "Safe." She understood the tone, if not the words. She climbed down slowly, legs shaking so badly she nearly fell twice. Jonas lowered the door and scattered fresh chicken feed across the boards, wiping away footprints with his boot. Just in time, the hoofbeats thundered into his yard. Jonas straightened, wiping dirt from his hands. He walked to the porch like a man annoyed by early visitors, not like someone hiding a terrified girl beneath his floorboards. Four riders came into view. Leading them was Everett Maddox, wealthy land broker, owner of the old mining camp, and a man who had bought influence all over the valley. Jonas's jaw clenched. Maddox smiled from horseback, a thin, polished thing with no warmth behind it. "Morning, Redden," he called. "We're looking for something that belongs to me." Jonas kept his face neutral. "Lost cattle." Maddox's smile widened. "Something smaller." His eyes swept across the yard. The coop, the barn, the scattered feed. Jonas stood still as stone. 3 of Maddox's men dismounted and began searching the property with the casual cruelty of men who didn't worry about consequences. Kicking open doors, knifing hay bales, peering into shadows like hunting dogs with guns. Jonas's pulse thumped once hard. Under his boots, in the darkness of the root cellar, the girl was listening. Terrified, waiting. The wrong word would kill them both. Pike, the scarred brute among Maddox's men, wandered close to the coop. He traced a finger along the wire. His eyes narrowed. "Chickens sure stirred up," Pike muttered. Something scared him. Jonas forced his voice steady. "Foxes." Pike didn't look convinced. Before he could step inside the coop, another rider shouted from the far side of the barn. "Tracks. Heading east." Maddox turned. Fresh hope flickered in his eyes. He nodded once. "Mount up." He looked at Jonas with a smile sharp enough to cut. "If you see anything unusual, you let me know." "I always do," Jonas lied. Maddox tipped his hat, then spurred his horse eastward. His men followed, vanishing over the ridge. Only when the last hoofbeat faded did Jonas allow himself to breathe again. He walked to the root cellar, lifted the door, and found the girl curled tightly in the corner, shaking, silent tears running down her face. She whispered something in her own language. Jonas didn't know the words, but he understood the meaning. What happens now? Jonas lifted the cellar door fully, letting a blade of daylight slip into the cramped darkness. Dust floated in the beam like drifting snow. The girl's eyes followed the light, wide and frightened, as if expecting someone else to appear above her. "It's just me," Jonas murmured. Her breathing slowed by a fraction. He offered his hand, palm up. She hesitated, studying him the way a wounded animal studies a stranger. Then, tentatively, she reached out. Her fingers were ice cold, trembling so hard he could feel the tremors through his callous skin. He helped her climb out. When her feet touched solid ground, her legs buckled. Jonas caught her gently before she fell. She stiffened in his arms, but she didn't pull away. Not this time. He eased her into the cabin, nudging the door shut with his boot. The room was dim, lit only by the morning sun seeping through the shutters. Dusty shelves, a worn table, a cold stove. The lonely life of a man who'd stopped expecting company. The girl's gaze darted around, taking in every shadow, every sound. When the wind rattled the shutters, she jumped, pressing her back against the wall. "Easy," Jonas whispered. "Ain't nobody here but us." She didn't understand the words, but tone mattered. He moved slowly, every motion deliberate. He set a kettle on the stove, lit a small flame, and filled a tin cup with water. The girl drank like she'd been lost in a desert. Too fast. Jonas had to take the cup from her hands before she made herself sick. She stared at him, chest rising and falling, waiting for what came next. He tore a piece of bread, softening it with water. She ate with quiet urgency, eyes never leaving his face, watching for danger, searching for signs of cruelty. Jonas knelt in front of her, keeping his voice low. "You're safe here. Understand." She swallowed, then raised her hand to her chest. Some. Her voice cracked with pain. Jonas frowned gently. "Your name?" She nodded slowly. She touched her chest again. "Mei Lin." Jonas repeated it softly. "Mei Lin." A tiny, fragile smile flickered across her face. First one he'd seen, but it vanished when he reached toward her wrist. The rope burns were raw and ugly. Deep grooves cut into the flesh, red and crusted. When he moved closer, she flinched violently, knocking over a chair. Her breath went wild. She crouched low in the corner, arms wrapped around her head. Jonas froze. Then he slowly sank down too, sitting cross-legged on the wooden floor, keeping a good distance. He let his hands rest on his knees, palms open. "Quiet. Steady. It's all right," he murmured. "I ain't gonna hurt you." A long silence passed, a breathing moment where neither of them moved. Then Mei Lin uncurled slightly. She watched him with wide, uncertain eyes, and slowly, painfully, she inched closer. When her trembling hand finally extended toward him, Jonas felt something inside his chest break open. She trusted him, just a little, but enough. He cleaned her wrists with warm water, using the gentlest touch he could manage. She winced with every pass of the cloth, but didn't pull away. When he wrapped the bandages, her eyes softened. She whispered something too quiet to understand. "Thank you," he guessed. She nodded. Jonas turned away to fetch more bandages and froze. A small mark on her shoulder, half hidden beneath her torn dress. He stepped forward. "What's this?" Mei Lin stiffened. Her hand flew to her shoulder, covering the brand. A narrow, circular scar burned deep into her skin. The symbol was unmistakable, a mark of ownership. Jonas's jaw locked. He'd seen brands like that on stolen cattle, on horses, never on a human being. Mei Lin's eyes widened, reading the fury in his face. She shook her head quickly, as if telling him not to be angry, not to make it dangerous. But Jonas felt something boiling through him, an old, familiar rage he hadn't let surface since the day he'd buried his wife and daughter. He forced himself to breathe. Slow, controlled. "Who did this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Mei Lin's eyes dropped to the floor. Tears gathered at the corners. She whispered a name that broke the room's silence. Bellwether. Jonas's stomach twisted. Everett Maddox Bellwether, one of the most powerful men in the territory. A man with enough money to buy silence. Enough land to hide sins. Enough influence to make evidence disappear. He'd been putting girls in cages, branding them, selling them. Jonas stood abruptly, pacing the room, heart pounding like a drum. Mei Lin shrank back, frightened by his sudden movement. Seeing her flinch snapped him out of it. Jonas dropped to one knee again. "Sorry, I ain't mad at you." He tapped his chest. "Mad at them." Mei Lin swallowed, nodding slowly. A soft thump outside made both of them freeze. Jonas crossed the room in 3 silent steps and peeked through the curtain. Dust on the horizon. Riders again, closer than before. They were circling back. Jonas's voice tightened. "We gotta move." He grabbed a saddlebag, stuffed it with bread, jerky, a water flask, a blanket. Mei Lin watched his every movement, trembling but determined. He lifted her carefully, guiding her toward the stable. Outside, the morning was too quiet, too still. Even the wind held its breath. Mei Lin winced with each step. The rope burns on her ankles, freshly opened from earlier, left faint drops of blood in the dirt. "We don't have long," Jonas said. Bellwether's man'll sweep the valley. She swallowed hard, gripping his sleeve. She whispered something urgent, voice like broken glass. He tried to read the fear behind her words. "They follow you?" She shook her head violently, then nodded. Her eyes said the truth. Bellwether didn't just want her back. He needed her gone. Jonas saddled his horse fast. Mei Lin tried to climb up, but her legs failed. She apologized in broken English, over and over. Jonas lifted her gently into the saddle. "You're all right. I got you." He mounted behind her, pulled the reins. A gunshot split the air. The bullet sliced through a fence post inches from his boot. Maylin screamed and clung to him. Jonas looked back. Four riders thundered over the ridge, Bellwether's men, rifles raised, faces carved from cruelty. Pike shouted, "You got something belongs to us, Redden." Jonas dug his heels into the horse's sides. "Hold on," he told Maylin. They bolted toward the tree line as another shot rang out, echoing across the valley like a warning. Jonas knew one thing as he pushed the horse harder. Whatever happened next would decide whether either of them lived long enough to see another sunrise. Jonas urged the horse harder toward the tree line, the animal snorting clouds of white breath into the cold air. Mei Lin clung to him, trembling against his chest, her fingers gripping the fabric of his coat like she feared being pulled away at any moment. Gunfire cracked behind them, sharp, cruel, hungry. Another bullet tore past his ear. Pike's voice carried across the open field. "Bring him down." Jonas kept low over the horse's neck. "Hold tight," he whispered. Maylin's small hand slid around his arm, desperate, trusting. The trees loomed ahead, tall pines and scrub oaks crowding together, shadows thick beneath their branches. If they could reach the cover, the riders would lose their clean shot. Jonas guided the horse straight into the narrow gap between the first two trunks. Branches whipped against his hat. The forest swallowed them whole. Behind them came shouts and curses. The riders slowed at the tree line, unwilling to ride full speed into the tight, twisting paths. But they didn't stop. Jonas heard them spreading out, circling, trying to surround him like wolves around wounded prey. He pulled the horse to a slower pace, weaving through the undergrowth. "We need high ground," he muttered, "or a place they won't think to look." Mei Lin pointed ahead, her breath quick, urgent. "There, rock up." Jonas followed her gaze. A ridge, narrow but steep, with boulders stacked like broken teeth along the slope. "Good eyes. Smart girl." He guided the horse toward the ridge just as two riders broke through the brush to their right. Pike spotted them first. "There!" Gunfire exploded again, bark flying from a nearby tree. The horse reared. Jonas held tight, feeling Mei Lin's scream muffled against his shoulder. He dug his heels in. The horse sprang forward, powerful legs digging into the earth as they climbed toward the rocky rise. Pike fired again, wild, angry, and close. Jonas cursed under his breath. One hit would take the horse down, and if that happened, he forced the thought away. They reached the base of a ridge. Jonas swung down, grabbing Mei Lin's waist and lowering her gently. She stumbled but stayed upright, leaning heavily on him. He led the horse behind a thick outcropping of stone. Gunfire tore through the brush below. Pike and two others were forcing their mounts through the trees, gaining on them fast. Jonas grabbed Mei Lin's hand. "Come on." She nodded, breath ragged, but kept pace. They scrambled up the jagged incline, boots slipping on loose gravel. Mei Lin's injured ankles gave out twice, but Jonas lifted her each time, refusing to let her fall. When they reached the top, Jonas pulled her behind a stack of boulders that formed a natural lookout. He raised a finger to his lips. "Quiet." Mei Lin crouched beside him, clutching her bandaged wrists, trying to still her breath. Below them, Pike's voice echoed through the trees. "They're close. Spread out." The men fanned out along the ridge's base. Jonas watched their movements carefully, calculating, waiting, hoping they'd miss the trail. For a moment, it seemed possible. Then Pike stopped. He dismounted, crouched low, and pressed two fingers into the dirt. When he lifted them, Jonas's stomach dropped. Blood. Small drops. Faint, but enough. Mei Lin's reopened ankle wounds. Pike smiled a cold, predatory smile. "They're heading up." Jonas whispered, "They're coming. We need another way off this ridge." Mei Lin pointed left, a narrow crack in the rocks leading down a sharp slope, almost hidden by brush. Jonas nodded. "Good. Let's move." They slipped through the gap, sliding down the far side of the ridge. Stones tumbled under their feet, clattering noisily. Jonas winced. Pike would hear that. When they reached the bottom, Jonas pulled Mei Lin into a crouch behind a fallen log. She was shaking, breath coming in sharp bursts. "Breathe slow," he said gently. "Slow." Her eyes met his, dark, frightened, but holding something else too. Strength. Jonas scanned the woods. They needed distance. Land. Confusion. He angled toward the river trail, hoping the water might mask their scent or sound. But before they could move, branches snapped to their right. A rider. Jonas froze. A tall man in Maddox's colors pushed through the brush. His rifle rested across his saddle, gaze scanning the trees. Jonas pulled Mei Lin flat against the ground. She trembled beneath his arm, but stayed silent. The rider passed within 20 feet. Jonas waited and waited, every second stretching thin as wire. When a sound of hoofbeats finally drifted away, Jonas exhaled, warm breath hitting the cold ground. "We need to get out of these woods," he whispered, "before they box us in." Mei Lin nodded, but her fingers touched his sleeve. She gestured toward the river trail, then farther east, making a winding motion with her hand. Jonas studied the direction. A ravine. Narrow, twisting, hidden by brush. A perfect escape route. "How'd you know?" he asked quietly. Mei Lin hesitated, then whispered, "Mining, camp, bellwether took us that way." Jonas's blood ran cold. She'd traveled this valley as a captive. He swallowed hard. "We follow your lead, then." Before they could move, a new sound cut through the woods. Hoofbeats. Many of them. Not close. Not far, but enough to send a chill down Jonas's spine. Maddox was calling in more men. They didn't have long. They reached the ravine entrance just as Pike's voice rose again. Closer. Angrier. "Crow's near. Find him." Jonas slipped into the ravine with Mei Lin tucked under his arm. The walls rose on both sides, narrow enough to hide them, but dangerous too. One echo could give them away. Mei Lin grabbed his sleeve suddenly. Her voice shook. "No go loud. Bellwether men. Hear rock always." Jonas nodded. Soft steps. "Stay low." They moved carefully, picking their way along the muddy incline, feet landing silent and slow. The ravine curved left, then right, then opened into a small hollow. Jonas's stomach twisted. Horse tracks. Fresh. Someone had been here recently. He crouched, studying the prints. One horse. Heavy set. Shod with expensive steel. Not Pike. Not the others. Everett Maddox himself. Mei Lin crouched beside him, eyes wide with dread. Her voice broke. "He lead. Always. Worse." Jonas touched her shoulder softly. "I won't let him take you." Before the moment could settle, a single gunshot echoed through the ravine, loud and sharp. Then Maddox's voice rang out, calm and cold. Jonas reddened. "You've got something that belongs to me." Jonas lifted his head, heart pounding. The echo made it impossible to tell which direction the voice came from. Mei Lin pressed against him, gripping his coat. Maddox called again, closer now. "Give her up, redden, and maybe I'll let you crawl away." Jonas drew a slow breath. He looked at Mei Lin, at her bruises, her raw wrists, her terror, and the spark of hope fighting beneath it all. "No," he whispered. He pulled her behind him as the voice echoed once more, now almost on top of them. Maddox was here, somewhere in the ravine. And when he stepped out of the shadows, everything Jonas chose next would decide both their fates. The ravine tightened around them like a throat closing. Shadows clung to the rock walls, and every echo twisted in the cold air, making it impossible to tell where Maddox stood. Jonas eased Mei Lin behind a jutting stone ledge, keeping his body between her and the open ravine. Her fingers clutched the back of his coat, trembling but silent. Another voice drifted through the twists of rock, smooth, calm, practiced. "Jonas, no need to make this difficult." "Maddox." His tone carried a smile Jonah could feel more than hear. A smile that said he already believed the game was won. Jonas scanned the ravine, eyes sharp, breath steady. He crouched slightly, listening past the pounding in his chest. A faint scuff. A shifting rock. Someone moving slow and deliberate. To their left. He motioned to Mei Lin, "Stay down." She nodded, face pale, eyes wide. Jonas gripped a fallen branch, thick as his forearm. Not a gun, not even a good club, but it was something. Maddox's voice floated closer. I'm offering you a mercy most men would never see. Walk away. Jonas exhaled once. You don't give mercy. A pause, then a soft chuckle. You're right. I don't. A shadow separated itself from the rocks. Maddox stepped into view. He wore an expensive coat, dusted with frost but spotless. His boots shone even in the dim light. His gloved hands rested casually at his sides, not even near his gun. He didn't need a posture. Power hung on him like a second skin. 3 of his men fanned out behind him, one along the lower ridge, another higher up, and Pike easing into view from the opposite side, closing the trap. Jonas tightened his grip on the branch. Easy now, Maddox said smoothly. This isn't personal. Jonas's jaw clenched. That girl you put in my coop didn't make it look real friendly. Maddox smiled faintly. When a man owns something valuable, he protects his investment. Mei Lin flinched, shrinking tighter behind Jonas. Maddox's eyes lifted toward her hiding place. Come now, old bird, he called softly. You've caused me enough trouble. Don't make me chase you anymore. Jonas's blood ran cold. Maddox didn't see her, but he knew. He always knew. Jonas stepped forward, blocking the view entirely. You ain't taking her. Maddox sighed, disappointed. Crow, you're a rancher. A nobody. You bury yourself out here in dust and sorrow. Why destroy your life for a girl you don't know? Jonas didn't blink. Because you don't get to decide who matters. One of Maddox's men snorted. Talk like that gets a man killed. Maddox lifted a hand. Silence. Then he took a single step forward. Jonas, I'll ask one last time. Give her back. Mei Lin pressed, her forehead against Jonas's back. He felt her shaking breath, felt her fear, felt the weight of a choice he knew was already made in his bones. No, Jonas said. The word was quiet, not loud, not dramatic, just final. Maddox's smile snapped away. Pike, the scarred brute, didn't wait. He lunged forward, swinging his rifle like a club. Jonas dodged, the branch cracking hard across Pike's jaw. Pike staggered, but didn't fall. 2 more men charged. Jonas shoved Mei Lin to the ground behind the rocks. Stay down. She cried out his name in broken English. Jonas, no. He turned just as the first man reached him. Jonas swung wide, catching the man's ribs. The second man tackled him low, driving them both into the dirt. Jonas hit hard, breath exploding from his chest. Fists rained down. He grabbed a handful of dirt and smashed it into the man's eyes. The man screamed, scrambling back. Pike recovered fast. Too fast. He lifted his rifle to aim. A rock struck him hard behind the ear. Pike dropped to one knee, stunned. Mei Lin stood behind him, chest heaving, rock trembling in her hands. Reached out and steadied her trembling hand. The danger was over, but their story, whatever came next, was only beginning. Martial riders spread through the ravine, tying up the last of Maddox's men. Dust rose in slow spirals. Pine branches shivered overhead as if the trees themselves were letting out a long-held breath. Jonas leaned against a boulder, rubbing the bruises forming across his ribs. Mei Lin stayed close, almost hovering. Her hand shook, but not from cold. Shock still lingered in every breath she drew. Judge Stone approached with measured steps. You all right, Redden? Jonas nodded once. Been better. Been worse. Stone's gaze softened. She's brave. Most grown men wouldn't have dared half of what that girl did. Mei Lin lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the compliment. Jonas looked at her, small, trembling, but unbroken. She saved herself, he said quietly. I just try to keep up. Stone crossed his arms. Well, she saved a whole lot more than herself. Maddox kept records, ledgers, lists. That girl pointed us right to them. Jonas frowned. Meaning? Stone's jaw tightened. Meaning Maddox wasn't just trafficking girls through the mining camp. He was running a full operation across 3 counties. Jonas felt something in his chest twist. Anger, grief, something that felt like both. Mei Lin's voice broke softly. Many girls, many hurt. Long time. Stone knelt beside her, his weathered voice gentler than Jonas expected. Because of you, We can free them. All of them. Her lips parted. Tears gathered at the edges of her lashes. She bowed her head, whispering something in Chinese, something that sounded like a prayer. Jonas watched her silently. Stone rose and turned to Jonas. We'll escort her to Willow Bend. She needs rest, care, someplace safe until the hearings begin. You coming? Jonas hesitated. The marshals could protect her better than he could. But the idea of letting her ride away with strangers, after everything, felt wrong in his bones. Before he could answer, Mei Lin gently tugged at his sleeve. You come too? She asked. Simple words. Small voice. But they hit harder than any punch pike threw. Jonas nodded. Yeah, I'll ride along. She exhaled, relief softening her whole body. They reached Willow Bend by dusk. Lamps flickered in cabin windows. Smoke curled from chimneys. The narrow dirt road wound past the church, the livery, and Judge Stone's small office. Jonas dismounted in front of the church steps. Mei Lin slid down after him, legs shaking. She stumbled, but Jonas steadied her quickly, a hand at her back. The pastor's wife, Mrs. Hollis, hurried out, short, round, and kind-eyed. Oh, you poor thing, she whispered, cupping Mei Lin's cheeks. Come in, child. Let's get you warm. Mei Lin looked at Jonas again, checking if she was safe to follow. He gave a small nod. Go on. She'll take good care of you. Mei Lin stepped into the parlor. Jonas watched through the doorway as Mrs. Hollis wrapped her in a quilt, easing her into a rocker beside the fireplace. The flames painted Mei Lin's face in soft gold, warming bruises, drying tears. She looked so small, and yet so incredibly strong. Jonas felt his chest tighten. Stone stood beside him. She'll be safe here. Jonas didn't answer. Stone studied him for a long moment. You thinking you're done with her story? Jonas sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I ain't sure what I'm thinking. Stone snorted. Well, she's sure thinking about you. Jonas turned. What's that supposed to mean? Stone gestured toward the parlor. Mei Lin was watching Jonas from across the room. Eyes soft, tired, full of something he couldn't name. She trusts you, Stone said. More than anyone else here. Don't break that. Jonas swallowed hard. Memories tugged at him. His daughter's hand in his, Rebecca's smile in the morning light. Pain he thought had buried itself rose back up, sharp and sudden. I don't know if I deserve that trust, he murmured. Stone shook his head. Desert's got nothing to do with it. She's alive because of you. Sometimes that's enough. Hours later, after doctors tended her wounds and Mrs. Hollis coaxed her into eating soup, Mei Lin finally slept. Jonas stood near the doorway, hat in hand, watching her breathe. Every rise and fall of her chest felt like proof she'd won a war no one should have had to fight. Mrs. Hollis rested a hand on his arm. She'll need time, and patience, and someone who's willing to help her learn she's safe now. Jonas nodded slowly. I can do that. He wasn't sure why the words came so easily, but they felt true. As he turned to leave, he felt fingers brush his coat. Mei Lin had woken. Her voice, barely there, whispered, Jonas. He knelt beside her. I'm here. Her eyes shimmered. You saved me. You stayed. Jonas nodded. I'm not going anywhere. She closed her eyes, relief softening her whole face. A small smile touched her lips, fragile but real. Jonas stood again, watching her fall back into sleep. He felt something shift inside him. Not grief, not guilt, something else. Purpose. It had been years since he'd felt it. The next morning, Judge Stone returned with bad news. Maddox's lawyers, Stone said grimly. Powerful ones. They'll try claiming Mei Lin's a runaway contract worker, and without proof she was held against her will. Jonas's fists clenched. You saw her injuries. Stone nodded. We did, but Maddox is slippery, and there are other girls we need to find. Other camps. Jonas stepped closer. What do you need? Stone looked at him, long and hard. A man who knows this land, he said, who can move quiet. Someone who understands the kind of cruelty we're dealing with. Someone who already proved he's willing to do what's right, even when it hurts. Jonas frowned. You're offering me a job? Stone nodded slowly. A mission, to find more girls like her, to shut down the rest of Maddox's operations. Jonas looked through the window. Mei Lin was sitting up now, wrapped in a quilt, sunlight warming her face. Mrs. Hollis was teaching her English words softly, pointing to objects in the room. Jonas watched her lips form the words. Safe. Home. Hope. He realized, all at once, she wasn't the only one who needed a second chance. He took a breath. I'll help you, he said, but only if she's safe first. Stone smiled. She will be, and when she's strong enough, she might even help us. Jonas blinked. What do you mean? Stone nodded toward the window. Girls trust girls, especially ones who survived what she did. She could save lives, Jonas. Jonas felt something settle into place. Purpose, direction, a path forward. One Mei Lin had given him without meaning to. Stone clapped a hand on his shoulder. We leave in a week. Jonas nodded. As Stone walked away, Mei Lin waved from the parlor window, small, gentle, hopeful. Jonas lifted his hand in return, knowing deep down, saving her life had saved his too. And the road ahead, dark, dangerous, uncertain, was one they would walk together. Not as lovers, not as a family, but as two broken souls choosing to fight for others so no one else had to survive Chicken Coop. The morning Jonas left Willow Bend carried the soft chill of early spring. Snowmelt trickled through the fields outside town. Horses stamped in their corrals, steam curling from their nostrils. The world looked different after the storm that had nearly broken them. He stepped onto the church porch, boots slow, hat in hand. He wasn't ready for goodbyes, but he knew this wasn't an ending. Inside, Mei Lin sat at a small wooden table with Mrs. Hollis, practicing letters on a slate board. Her posture was straighter today. Her cheeks had color again. When she traced the letter J, Mrs. Hollis tapped the table and smiled. Good. Very good. Mei Lin lifted her head at the sound of Jonas's footsteps. Her eyes lit up, soft, warm, steady. He'd never seen eyes change so much in such a short time. She stood and walked to him, not timidly, not shrinking. She carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone rediscovering her own worth. You go today, she said softly. Jonas nodded. Stone wants us to track Maddox's partners before word spreads. Says we'll save more girls if we move before the rats scatter. Mei Lin nodded. You find them. Jonas exhaled, something aching behind his ribs. I'll try. She reached out, hesitant, then placed her fingers gently on his wrist. You help me. You help many. You strong man. Jonas shook his head. No, just a stubborn rancher who got lucky. Mei Lin frowned thoughtfully. No, you have heart. Big heart. Her hand pressed lightly against his chest. Here. He swallowed. The moment felt too big, too fragile to touch. Mrs. Hollis says, she continued carefully, when people help each other, pain gets smaller. Lighter. She looked down at her own hands. Maybe I help too. Girls like me, they listen. They trust. If you find them, I talk to them. Jonas stared at her. You sure about that? It won't be easy. Her eyes rose to meet his, steady, determined. I live because someone saved me. Now, I help others live. A breath. This is purpose. The word struck him hard. Purpose. He'd forgotten the shape of it. Now it stood right in front of him. Jonas cleared his throat. Stone says when we're done in Pine Hollow, we'll return here. Reorganize. Plan next steps. Mei Lin's lips curved into a hopeful smile. You come back. It wasn't really a question. Jonas lifted his hat. I will. He started to turn, but Mei Lin touched his arm again, a feather-light touch that somehow stopped his whole world. Jonas, she whispered, you saved my life. But also, she placed her hand over her heart. You saved this. It was the closest thing to a thank you she could offer. And it was more than enough. Jonas swallowed the lump in his throat. You healed it yourself. She smiled. Small, true, beautiful in its quiet strength. He stepped out into the sunlight. The trail to Pine Hollow was long and rugged. Jonas rode with Judge Stone and 2 federal marshals, their horses kicking dust over the valley floor. Jonas kept his gaze forward, but his thoughts circled like hawks. He thought about the chicken coop, about the bruises on her wrists, about the way terror had turned into trust right in front of him. He thought about purpose, how it had slipped through his fingers for years, only to return with the weight of a girl's trembling hand in his. Stone rode up beside him. You thinking about her? Jonas didn't deny it. Yeah. Stone nodded once. She's the kind of person who reminds men why they fight. Jonas gripped the reins tighter. She's tougher than she knows. True, Stone said. But even tough people need someone in their corner. Jonas didn't answer. He didn't need to. 2 months later, Jonas stood on a ridge overlooking a mining camp in the middle of Red Valley. The trail had led them through canyons, forests, gulches, and 2 firefights that came closer to ending him than he cared to admit. But they found the camp Maddox's ledger described, and they found what they feared. More girls, locked in sheds and storage barns, worked to exhaustion, marked like Mei Lin had been. Jonas's stomach turned as the marshals cut their bindings, led them to safety, wrapped blankets around their shaking shoulders. One girl, a tiny thing with fire-scorched hair, refused to speak until Stone mentioned Mei Lin's name. Then she burst into tears and whispered, "She alive? She truly alive?" Jonas nodded. "She's safe. She's healing." The girl sagged in relief, clinging to his coat. "She tell us someone come. She say someone brave. Someone kind." She looked up at him with glassy eyes. "Is that you?" Jonas froze. Emotions swelled fast and heavy. He knelt beside her. "No," he said softly. "That's her. She's the brave one." But deep down, he knew this mission was no longer just a duty. It was a promise he intended to keep. When the last girl was taken to safety and the camp was secured, Jonas rode back toward Willow Bend with Stone. Evening turned the sky purple. Lanterns flickered on distant porches. Jonas's pulse quickened as they neared the church. He wasn't sure what he expected: fear, distance, hesitation. Instead, when the door opened, Mei Lin stepped onto the porch. She paused only a heartbeat. Then she ran to him. "Jonas!" He caught her, gently, carefully, and she wrapped her arms around him with a fierce certainty he hadn't felt from another human in years. "You come back," she breathed against his shoulder. Jonas smiled, small, tired, real. "Told you I would." When she pulled back, she searched his face for wounds, fear flickering through her eyes until she saw he was all right. "You safe," she whispered. "So are you." She nodded, fingers curling around his sleeve like she couldn't quite let go. Mrs. Hollis stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, smiling knowingly. Judge Stone cleared his throat and pretended he didn't see anything. Jonas looked down at Mei Lin. "Stone thinks, if you're willing, you could help us. Not just translate, not just comfort, but lead. Teach the rescued girls how to feel safe again." Mei Lin's breath caught. "Help like you help." He nodded. "Just like that." She looked out at the quiet street, the small town, the world trying to heal itself. Then she placed her hand over Jonas's, slow, gentle, certain. "I come with you," she said. "We save them together." Jonas felt something settle deep in his chest. Not grief, not loneliness, but purpose, warm and steady. "You sure?" he asked softly. Mei Lin lifted her chin. "I'm not scared anymore. Not when you were there." Jonas closed his hand around hers. "Then let's get to work." The two of them stood together on that small wooden porch. One man broken by loss, one girl broken by cruelty, each finding strength in the other. Not as lovers, not as replacements for what they'd lost, but as partners in something bigger than themselves. A mission, a calling, a promise to protect the girls nobody else protected. And as twilight settled over Willow Bend, Jonas knew one thing with absolute certainty. Saving Mei Lin had saved him, too. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild West Emotional Tales, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.